Alright, let's check it out.
On screen now. We all know that racing games are going through a lean period right now, from focusing far too much on elements that nobody really cares about, to just flat out failing to innovate in a genre which, as it stands, is still years behind many others. The sheer level of stagnation and the lack of new and interesting experiences available in these games has reached a level never before seen in the genre, and part of that is down to the reception. Despite the obvious
I remember still one thing, like Eden always had a fresher look at Horizon 5 than I did. I remember I watched the trailer with him together, and he got excited and I didn't. Like, he was so hyped when he saw this, and I was like, yeah, another Horizon. Like, I couldn't match his hype at the time.
In fact, one of the main reasons I made GT Critique in the first place was because of this. People focusing far too much on just microtransactions in the economy as the main culprits of why GT7 was so bad, when there were many other factors. Just removing microtransactions and boosting payouts was not, and still won't, fix the game.
Well, true. It's something that it shouldn't have been in the game in the first place, and it is definitely one of those things that triggers people. And, you know, people don't really shut up until it is fixed.
The problem is that if Polyphony could see this happening, they would just think that it's all part of the natural discourse. Some people complaining and others defending it, and they should just continue as normal. It's obvious after everything that they're never going to remove microtransactions and the always online requirement from GT7, so these complaints fell on deaf ears. In an interview, series producer Kazunori defending it, they're never going to remove microtransactions. I remember
2 million credits being 20 euros. Did they actually increase the prices on the microtransactions too? I guess it just got more pay to win, or rather, pay more to win.
And here is where we reach the topic of nostalgia. Nostalgia bias is incredibly powerful, a lot more so than what people often realize. This tends to be about previous experience.
The thing about nostalgia bias, either I actually understand what I like and what was actually good in old games, or I brainwashed myself so hard that I can't distinguish it. But then I play older games and they're just better. You know what I mean? Like, I'll boot up GT4 and I'll just like it more, you know? And that is coming from someone that has basically played GT7 and 4 within a year, right?
The thing with GT4 was that it didn't really have a catch like the first 3 games. It was just Gran Turismo, the 4th one, which was great. If you loved Gran Turismo, you would love GT4. It was more of everything you loved. But it was clear from the comments around that time that people had expected a little bit more. Think about what new features GT4 really introduced, mainly B-Spec and photo modes. Hardly the most exciting things for racing game fans. But the problem was more about what it didn't have. Changeable time and weather, serious customization, exotic brands like Ferrari and Lamborghini, physical or mechanical car damage, more than 6 cars on the track, an actual online mode beyond the closed beta, or AI opponents that don't just drive into the player for fun. These were the exact same issues that people had with the previous 3 games, and none of them had been addressed.
But you know, I mean, I'm a little bit more dry when it comes to this stuff. Like, for me, GT4 is like GT3 with more content, and therefore it's the better game. You know, just on a very basic level, that is true for me.
I believe this is one of the key reasons why GT5 had such high expectations from the get-go, which it ultimately could never live up to because it promised everything which GT4 was missing, and then some. It's also partly why Forza Motorsport managed to get such a foothold in the genre, because it capitalized on what GT4 lacked.
Yeah, I'm really curious if the new the new Forza Motorsport is trying to do the same. Like, if the Forza guys are clever, they do everything differently that people hate about GT7, right? If they did their homework of the things that people hate about GT7 and they just don't put it into Forza Motorsport, they have a good chance of taking some market share.
Of course, that context shouldn't change how we enjoy the game in current day, but when I see comments saying all they had to do was make it like GT4 in regards to GT7, I just shake my head and move on. What else can you do?
Gotta defend the people make a game like the old game. Because in most cases, it would make for a better game than what we actually got. I totally agree that, you know, innovation is gonna make the best game. But usually they fuck up the innovation part, and it would have been better if they just had a game like the old one, right? Instead of Unbound, having a new Most Wanted would have been better, right? Even without any innovation, just making a better version or a new version of Most Wanted would be better than Unbound.
I love GT3, but I don't want Gran Turismo 8 to be GT3 with new cars and shiny graphics. That completely defeats the point. And this disregard for context when it comes to these older games applies to other series as well. So
either you make a new game that is actually good, or you just copy and paste what worked in the past. But what we get so often is a new game that is worse than the old game, right? That is why people are upset, you know? It's not that we're upset that, hey, we get new stuff, I only want old stuff. No, we want good stuff. I think that's the point why gamers are mad. We're not getting good stuff anymore. Like, we're not even complaining about, you know, lack of innovation or too much innovation. It's just the games kind of suck. The reason why people ask for old games is because the old games were actually good. It's not like keep everything the same. Just give us a good game.
To sport. Most would agree that the fourth installment of that series, much like Gran Turismo, was the best one. Yes, it was very solid in all areas. It had an interesting and varied car list and a strong progression to tie it all together.
Yeah, that's the point. It's a strong title, right? It just does so many things right. People just get pissed off when you get so many basic elements of a video game wrong. When you just cut everything out that people like. That's why people like this game, because it has everything. Right? It doesn't have to be the most innovative game to be good. You can be innovative, but make the game good first. It's so important.
But saying it will always be the greatest? Hell no. How it's often compared to...
It might be, though. Like, considering the shit that they've been releasing the last decade, Motorsport 4 might stay the best game in the series. That's just true.
When GT6 came out a couple of years later, I was straight back over to the PS3. But a few years down the line, I actually played through Forza Motorsport 3, its predecessor. And do you know what my big takeaway was from FM3? Just how similar it was to FM4. From the style and presentation to the gameplay itself, it all just felt way too familiar. At least with GT4, even if it didn't innovate or change much in terms of gameplay and game design, it felt different. The presentation and style was completely unique, and still doesn't feel like any other game in the series. FM4 doesn't even have that. It's why some people likened it to an annual sports release that just improves ever so slightly in a few areas. But none of this is to say you're wrong thinking these games...
They worked super well for the F1 games, right? Like, F1 23 was already on the decline, but then F1 22 was already on the decline, and then 23, like, super tanked. Like, so few people were interested in F1 23, it was crazy.
My problem is when I see people holding them in such high regard, to the point where it feels like nothing could ever surpass them in their mind, that is an issue. Because it gives off the wrong impression and ultimately doesn't help the situation.
The thing is, I don't think that we can help the situation. Like, I've been in this space professionally for 6.5 years. They never asked me about my opinion. Nor have I ever seen that developers actually listen to the community. Like, it happens so rarely that they take any feedback and put it into the game. I really don't think they want to listen. It's just an extra step that they don't have time for. Like, developers already don't have enough time to make the game that they're supposed to release anyways. Now they have to also listen to a bunch of angry community people to improve the game. Like, they don't have time for that, in my opinion. Dude, yeah, Solica, single developer, probably listens more to feedback than all AAA studios combined.
When racing games have generally failed to meet players' expectations for such a long period of time, these older games have now become the baseline for a lot of people's expectations.
Yep.
I'll get into that a bit later, but something that needs to be mentioned is that these
right approach, if you ask me.
Ideas aren't as objective.
Like, would you, like, think about it. Would you go to a dealership and buy a car now that is worse than a car that released 15 years ago? Imagine you buy the new BMW. It eats more gasoline, the ride is more uncomfortable, and it costs more money. Like, would you buy it? Would you buy that car? Right? Like, obviously, that applies to video games too.
And if there is a current racing game series which seems to elicit the strongest emotions in people, it has to be Need for Speed. So, full disclosure, I haven't played Need for Speed Unbound, nor have I played much of the classic Need for Speeds like Underground, Most Wanted, Pro Street, etc. But what I'm about to say doesn't require me to have played those games.
You have not played the black box era. This is literally the only thing that matters. That and classic Need for Speeds. Like, you basically want the golden era. You want the classic Need for Speeds and then everything from black box. He hasn't even played the stuff. Whatever, let's listen.
Games, which is the Need for Speed community needs to chill the fuck out.
Nah.
With Need for Speed games, the presentation is a lot more important than many other titles. People come into them wanting a specific feeling or vibe. But that still doesn't excuse some of the shit I've seen. The soundtrack is not that big of a deal. I've listened to it, I've listened to the OSTs of some of the older games, I prefer the older ones, but the visceral reaction that's come from it is...
The new one is really bad though. The new soundtrack is really, really bad though. Like it is so bad. It triggered like 90% of the Need for Speed fans, right?
As someone who doesn't play Need for Speed games regularly, the OST just sounds like what I'd expect a modern Need for Speed soundtrack to sound like.
Bullshit.
For better or for
garbage.
Worse. Of course, there are fair criticisms that can be made about it, but that strongly negative response has unfairly dominated the discussion. Because what are these complaints really saying?
The soundtrack is shit.
The tone of the game, just go back to how it was in the older titles.
Dude, like everyone turned off the soundtrack and just played their own music, man.
I feel like for most people complaining about the lack of variety, it's not about the variety. It's the tone and style of music which they don't gel with. Because if the overall tone and music selection was designed to appeal specifically to them, variety would no longer be an issue in their mind, even if it all sounded very similar.
Like Need for Speed always had a varied soundtrack, but the songs just were not shit. The people care way too much. That is true. That is true. Like I'm the kind of person that just turns off the soundtrack when it's shit. But it's true that people like jump on like one specific thing, then everyone has like a circle jerk hating on one specific thing. That is true. But it doesn't change the fact that they should do some audience testing with soundtrack and maybe art style before they release a game, just to see how people would react before they create the shitstorm.
Anyway, the second contentious point about Unbound was the visual. Some people say they don't like the mix of cartoony style and realism, and I get that, but my question is, if this is what they wanted to do, why didn't they go all the way and really commit to it? My guess is that they were testing the waters to see what the response would be like. Maybe we could see a future Need for Speed game in entirely this style, and I for one would welcome that. I mean, something that looks like Auto Modelista, but...
Okay, he welcomes that and he doesn't even play the games. I mean, I don't have an opinion on politics when I don't read up on politics, you know? Like, he says he likes the cartoon style and then he hasn't even played the game. Like, what's the point of liking something and then not playing it? I mean, that's weird to me. Like I'm saying, hey, I really like this concept, but I'm still not gonna play the game. Like that's a bit weird to me. If you like something, you should probably, I don't know, play it.
But it is sad that realism has just been accepted as the norm for racing games. Of course I know why, because a lot of the time they're used as showcases for what's possible in terms of fidelity and performance, but it's still disappointing nonetheless. I mean, how can it be accepted that an arcade racer like Need for Speed, with its nitro boosts and cars flying off ramps and whatnot...
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, you can't say, hey, I like this art style, they should do more of it, and then I won't play it. Like, that's so weird. Like, you can't say, hey, I like the way you're doing this, but I don't want to see more. It just bites itself.
If you go back to the early to mid 2000s, those soundtracks were the coolest things ever. If you were like 10.
And now he's shitting on metal. Come on, man. Come on, dude.
Of course, a lot of people now listen to these songs and consider them modern classics because of that.
There's some dog shit in there. Like, I mean, Fired Up is a nice meme song, like but it's pretty bad.
It was edgy and over the top.
There's definitely some shit songs in there, but like,
still reflect
I would still listen to like Cell Dweller
at the time.
And,
of course, a lot.
Let's see, Styles of Beyond, Skinny Man, for example. That one's a banger. Feet Addiction is also super good. Static X with Skinny. Yeah, there we go, Skinny Man. And I mean, like, you can't hit Undisturbed. Like that's just all over the place.
So what people are doing is comparing the OSTs of these older games with all of the context and understanding that's been built up over the years to the OST of Unbound, which has none of it.
Because those songs are suddenly bad in 2023.
The severity of the backlash is not at all warranted, and if you put yourselves in EA and Criterion's position, what are you supposed to do with this feedback? Just pretend we still live in 2005? It doesn't help. In a previous video, I talked about Toyota's ongoing absence from Need for Speed.
You know, I mean, I said it a few times, but I don't need a copycat of Most Wanted. You know, I just want them to take more time and actually create a good game, not something that feels like they are just ticking some boxes, right? Like in Unbound, it was very, very obvious. Like, you get a cool car, it gets taken away, you win it back at the end of the game. And then fill it up with random shit in between. Like, when it comes to engaging story, Most Wanted did it better. Way better. Even Carbon. Or even Undercover. Like, it just feels so half-assed. And it was especially obvious with Unbound. Heat, they actually tried, in my opinion. Heat, they actually did really well story-wise. Although a lot of people don't like Anna, which I can somehow understand, but the overall story I found super enjoying. The handling needs a lot of work. They should ditch the engine and just make a new handling model, but it's not really part of the discussion right now. I mean, obviously, people have been asking to remove Break the Drift for the longest time, which we kinda got in Unbound.
It's sad to say, but the elephant in the room is that for a large number of people, no matter what these franchises do with their future games, nothing can live up to what has come before. I love lots of classic games I grew up with, but to think that they were created in this unique time and space, which means they can never be surpassed or even matched, is ludicrous. And for the game developers making the creative decisions, this is just expected. They know with every new release, they're going to see comments like, this isn't as good as X was, just make it like X. And for them, that type of comment is truly meaningless.
You know what I would like to see though? I would love to see for the developers, for the publishers, just once, do everything like the nostalgia nerds are screaming. You know, just one time, go 100% all in on all the nostalgia that people have and make a game just for the nostalgia boys and girls out there and just see how it sells in comparison, right? That's what I want to see. I want to, like, if they want to, like, try new stuff all the time, might as well try something they've done before and that was successful. Just to test out the waters, rather than this.
But I still hope that one day there will be a racing game that takes everything it does and just improves it and adds to it in new and original ways. That is my dream.
Yeah,
one that,
I
at this
can
rate,
agree on that.
I may have to realize myself,
make a good game.
A dream nonetheless. If I had to pick one thing that I've noticed as a bit of a trend in modern racing games, it would be that game designers don't really seem to understand what people want from their games. Of course, I'm going to use the example of GT7, where it's plainly obvious that Polyphony don't understand why people loved the past GT games, and so GT7 ended up as this disjointed mess, still trying to pretend it's just like them. Codemasters Formula 1...
Okay, that's pretty funny.
Codemasters Formula 1 games are another great example, where in F1 2021 they removed all of the classic F1 cars, and then in F1 22 brought in supercars to effectively replace them. Look, we can argue about licensing costs and the ease of obtaining them.
I'm not really sure they really have licensing costs, because don't they just give, like, parts of the... As far as I know, they get a percentage of the sales revenue.
Nobody wanted the supercars, and nobody plays a Formula 1 game for them. The same goes for all of the lifestyle features they've added. Yeah,
that's something I really don't give a shit about. Like, pretending I have a virtual home with people I don't know and cars I don't own. So pointless. And buying fucking clothing that I really don't care about. So, I hate it in Forza too, in Horizon.
It truly is a masterclass in how to squander something special. They took this focused and engaging sports title and are now trying to turn it into Test Drive Unlimited, where you get to dress up your avatar and buy furniture for your imaginary house. But speaking of Test Drive Unlimited...
The thing is, that's just additional stuff. I know, it's additional stuff that didn't change the game, but it takes away from potentially other features that people might be interested in.
And a few weeks ago, we got a gameplay reveal, and it was pretty bad. Ironically,
really
it had
bad.
the opposite problem. TDU was built on the lifestyle elements and
was really
exploration,
bad.
and they basically showed none of that, just driving around aimlessly for the most part.
Yeah, I totally agree with the, like, they shouldn't have shown Test Drive Unlimited before it was ready. Like, they just showed it too early. This could have been a really cool event, like 3 months later, when the game was a lot more polished.
A much more polished gameplay reveal came a couple of months back, courtesy of the upcoming Forza Motorsport reboot. Quite a few things were shown off, and I was fairly interested, so I made a video discussing
that one was
them.
way better.
It was a more speculative, podcast-style discussion, unlike my usual highly critical video essays like this one. That video had a quite noticeably more negative response than anything else I've ever put out. Reading the comments, not only on my video, but about the gameplay reveal as a whole, the most controversial topic had to be the car XP system. For those who don't know, in Forza Motorsport, you won't be able to purchase upgrades for your car using money, but instead with XP. This is a massive departure from what we're used to with Forza, particularly the Horizon spin-offs.
I think that could be fun, because at some point you're gonna have a shit ton of money and then you just buy everything and it doesn't feel very rewarding. So maybe this could be fun to actually unlock the upgrades after using the car for a while, because then you have that feeling of progression. You know, like you know it from Need for Speed. You get a starter car, you use it, you get money, you upgrade it, and you keep upgrading it and using it, rather than just immediately getting your stock car to S-Class. And yeah, exactly. It's totally about balancing here. They need to make it not feel too grindy, but because if it just ends up being a grind, people are going to get bored of it and they're going to complain again. So yeah, it's about like the necessary time investment overall and how fun like unlocking the performance parts for each car are. For example, there's a lot of racing games where you do like one specific event because it gives you the most experience. But imagine you take the most optimal event for 200 different cars. Right? You always do, let's say, the Nürburgring, right? So you do the Nürburgring in every single car because it's the fastest way to upgrade it. Like, they need to force players to not over-optimize their gameplay, right? They need to think of something, because otherwise people are just going to use the most optimal event and it's going to be super fucking boring. Yeah, like players will optimize the fun out of gameplay if you let them. If you give players the option to do the easiest way all the time, they will use it and then they will get bored. I will play this on release, absolutely.
This change is really interesting, as you now have to build up your car and build that relationship with it as you go. Of course, I recognised how much different this would be, and not everyone would be happy, since they would have to adapt their way of playing, and meant they were more limited in terms of what they could initially do with a car. But that's all part of the experience, experimenting with different builds and trying different things.
Okay, let me explain to you how that could work. For example, there's a rotation. Like, you get a new car, you have to do another event, and only this event will give you experience, right? You literally force the player to do a certain event. They can't choose the most optimal event all the time, maybe because it has diminishing returns. You do the event twice in a row, now you get 80%. You do the third time, you get 60% experience. You do the fourth time, you only get 40% experience, right? Like, some kind of mechanic should be in place to discourage doing the same shit over and over again.
And I did see many comments echoing the same idea, how much of a different style of playing and gameplay loop it would create, for better and for worse. But the sheer amount of other comments I saw completely condemning the system outright as absolute garbage, simply because they can't V8.
Yeah, or having bonus XP on a certain event, cycling on a daily basis. That would totally work too, because that also makes people do different things and not do... You know, in Gran Turismo 7, where I was grinding this one Tokyo event with the bugged car for an entire day so I can earn 20 million credits. Payday 2 has this mechanic. Yeah, it's a good mechanic. You need to really make sure that people don't optimize the fun out of your game.
I'm not trying to say that this is going to make Forza Motorsport an incredible game, because how they balance it will be important, and in practice it may end up not really working if they don't implement it correctly. But it's way too early to make that call, and the potential is there, if they get it right, to do something unique and interesting. The problem with a lot of these comments is that they don't seem to recognise that this decision is a trade-off. One of the biggest complaints with modern Forza is that everything feels aimless. There is a real lack of progression, as many things are way too easy to obtain, and this results in the game lacking long-term goals to keep the player invested. What are these comments actually saying? Are they saying the current much ridiculed system is fine and doesn't need changing? Because from not a single one of these comments saying that it's a terrible idea have I seen someone suggesting alternatives or ways to improve the current system. The point is that conceptually, as an idea, it has solid foundations, ones that have been proven to work in other genres of games, so why not give it a go? True innovation in any field has to defy expectations. If you're in a boardroom pitching an idea and everyone unanimously agrees with it, you are almost certainly not coming up with something revolutionary. If you were, there would be some pushback. People saying, I'm not sure about this. With any decision, you have to weigh up the positives and the negatives, but so many people only seem to see the negatives in anything that seems unfamiliar. Forza Motorsport's Car XP system, Unbound's art style and effects, these are not the most groundbreaking ideas, and yet they still see major pushback for daring to try something new.
I do have to agree on one thing though, people overreacted really badly to the art style. Like, that was a massive overreaction. I think the soundtrack was kind of fair. The soundtrack was really that bad in my opinion. But I do care, I guess I personally care more about music than I care about art style.
Actually want. A lot of the time, they just want what they already know. Remember when I said about players' baseline expectations reverting back to these older games? Don't give us something new and interesting, give us what we already had.
No. This is not true. This is not true at all. I genuinely think most people just want a good game. And they refer to the old games because they were better, right? People not saying, give us the old stuff because we like the old stuff. No, those were good games, we want good games. And then we point backwards and say, hey, look at this game, this was good. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. Nobody's saying that in my opinion. You know, people say, you know, Most Wanted was my favorite Need for Speed, or Motorsport 4 was my favorite Forza. Because they're pointing at the game that was the best, and they haven't matched that quality yet. It's not saying I want the same game all over again. Like, that is where I hard disagree. It's not people saying I don't want innovation. They want a fantastic game and innovation, in my opinion.
Of course, there will be diminishing returns,
exactly what I said.
But the truth is that had the genre followed the natural path of evolution and improvement in terms of gameplay and game design, not just on the technical side, which we've seen, the genre should be far ahead of what we had in the 2000s. And the fact that it isn't doesn't mean that we should try and recreate this golden period of racing games. We should be expecting far more in current day. That quote from Kaz, mentioning the disconnect between player expectations and his philosophy, in its intended context with GT Sport and GT7, is in some ways laughable. Because what Kaz often wants to put in these games is seemingly dictated by whichever side of the bed he gets out of in the morning. It could be an incredible system that has the potential to create new and fascinating experiences, or the biggest crock of bullshit you've ever seen. And there's not much in between.
Wait, increase the pricing.
Fascinating experiences.
I made a dedicated video making fun of this car costing 18.5 million. Now it's 20 million. The F1 GT, more expensive than F1 regular. Oh yeah, the GT version. Oh yeah, true. Yeah, true. Yeah, I mean it's side by side. Yeah, like I remember when like the cars got more expensive over time to reflect real world prices. Great, so now I get fucked by inflation in my video games too. So now I feel poor in real life and I feel poor in the video game. Fantastic.
There is something I want to address about my critique of GT7. The core foundation I built that series on was the idea of what GT7 could be, what I envisioned was possible for it given the untapped potential. Throughout that series, I do of course compare GT7 quite often to the previous games in the series, and I think a few people got the wrong idea with that. The main reason I did that was because GT7 was billed as a true successor to the classic GT games. It was very obvious from the marketing and what Kaz has said before and since then. The classic GT formula is quite simple and frankly a bit outdated at this point. It has been done.
You know, before I played these games, I always complained about the menus being fucking confusing and stupid. That you can't like change the car when you're at the event selection or do certain things in certain menus, and you always had to like menu through the entire fucking game before you could change something. Like that's something that triggered me so hard with classic Gran Turismos.
So if they ever do bring it back, they need to make meaningful changes that actually expand the experience and not reduce it. You know, another Gran Turismo content creator by the name of Rowdy put out a poll a couple of months back asking people what they think needs the most attention in GT7, and the option that came out with a landslide victory was more cars and tracks. Why? We are already getting more cars and tracks in the monthly updates. But what we're not getting are improvements to the actual AI, or fixing the completely unbalanced economy beyond trying to plaster over the cracks with...
Yeah, the economy triggered me the most, of all things. Putting you into a constant fear of missing out on cars, trying to force you to buy microtransactions. Like, that is such a dirty ass business tactic for a full price game. It's on a €500 console. I mean, it's the same reason I stopped playing Forza Horizon, because I just don't care about new cars being added. Same for Unbound. Like, you just add more cars to the game. It doesn't change that I don't like the base game.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. GT7 still has the potential to be the greatest racing game of all time. But simply adding more cars and tracks is not gonna get it there.
In my opinion, they're already working on the next game though. Like, I don't think they're gonna do anything more than adding tracks and cars to this game, because that takes the least amount of work and allows them to work on the next game. So I really don't see any massive improvements to this game.
I'm not trying to say that you have to come up with a solution whenever you make a criticism. That would be like only being allowed to complain about your meal at a restaurant if you're also a chef and can work out what needs to be changed in the recipe.
Fucking chicken is raw.
Now, nostalgia will be a part of all of our lives, it's just human nature. But with racing games, so many people seem to just use it as a crutch to ignore originality, which isn't good. I do not see how someone with creative control of one of these games can look at all of the feedback from all sides of the community and glean anything from it. It's just a mess of contradictions and confusion. There are so many people who wear their rose-tinted glasses with pride that to a lot of developers, the message is clear. No matter what we do, it will never be good enough. So a lot of them don't even seem to try. Why should...
Here I have to intercept, because other genres get it, right? Other genre makers get it. They can read through the bullshit and actually get constructive feedback from all the bullshit, right? Look at any other genre. Like, why would racing be any different, right? Like, look at shooters, look at RPGs, look at anything that is not the racing genre. Like, the other franchises get it, right? Like, why would racing be the only exception where the community confuses the developers? Like, it's just at the end laziness from developers and publishers alike. And I do not agree that other genres are less toxic or less mainstream or more mainstream. Like, all of that shit doesn't really matter. Like, in my opinion, it's ridiculous to think that just for racing, the developers get too confused by the different opinions by people. It's the same everywhere. You can look at Call of Duty comments, you can look at Assassin's Creed comments, you can look at any game that comes to your mind that still gets released. They can read through the bullshit and still develop good games. Like, that I can't agree with, because why would racing be any different? Alright, let's finish the video.
But we all know that the games can still be far better than they are right now. It's more about how we convey that idea to the people who make the decisions. And people will have different opinions, sure, but some complaints are just so needless. Arguing about things that just
The thing is, if he understands which comments are needless, then in my opinion, the developers and publishers, they understand that too, right? I do think they decide very deliberately what they want to do and what they don't want to do, and who to listen to and what to not listen to. I actually think it's ridiculous, just thinking that only in racing games they don't understand what to do, but developers in all other genres, they get it, right? It doesn't make sense.
Oh, and also never pre-order games, you filthy animals.
Agreed. Good video, man.